Sue Gerrard is a multi-award-winning poet who has published 8 poetry collections and one spoken word compilation called Word of Mouth. She's written 3 local history books, a collection of ghost stories and a novella. Sue has read her own work at numerous venues throughout the country, including the Edinburgh Fringe Festival with the National Poetry Society, the Edinburgh Folk Festival and the Bolton Festival. She's also appeared at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, and her poems have been broadcast regularly on Radio Merseyside, Radio City and Radio Piccadilly. Her tireless work and energy extends to education, where she's developed many successful school workshops and adult workshops teaching creative writing. Monkey Nuts and Mayhem, a humorous collection of cautionary tales, is her latest book, containing poems which comment and reflect on the humorous side of life when things go wrong. With the book garnering great reviews, Sue has recently received an invite to perform at the Poetry Society Cafe, Covent Garden, in the summer of 2015. To tell us more, Sue joins us on this edition of Arts Alive Books. Welcome to Arts Alive Books. Coming up later, we preview the upcoming Writing on the Wall American Dreams Festival, which is taking place at multiple venues across Liverpool. But first tonight, local author Sue Gerrard joins us. Sue, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you for asking me to come in.
You're welcome. We're going to be talking a little bit about this, which is your latest collection,
Yes.
Monkey Nuts and Mayhem, a humorous collection of cautionary tales.
Yes, that's right.
But this is the latest of a long series of publications. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into writing poetry?
Yes, I think it all started when I was very young because I loved reading, and I think it just gave me a love of words and situations, and I like the idea of being able to create situations and to be in charge rather than other people being in charge of me. So it was a little bit of a rebellious streak. And I wrote my first short story when I was 12, and it was published in the Liverpool Echo. And then I moved on and I wrote poems, and the first poem I had published was when I was 14, and that was in a national magazine. So it's sort of, not that I've been writing continuously all that time, but it started at a young age, but then life gets in the way and the writing gets shelved, and then you go back to it. But it's always been part of my life.
Yeah, so you got the bug quite early.
Yes, very early, yes.
And a love of language, I suppose, which must be fundamental for anybody who wants to write poetry.
Yes, I just love the English language. I love the fact that you can do play on words with it. I love the humour and the beautiful words that we have.
Yeah. So what was your first collection then? The
first collection was at great personal expense, and I got some financial backing there, and it was very well received. And as I even got a compliment on the title of From Adrian Henry, which really made me feel very pleased. Yeah. And of course, at great personal expense is very true, not necessarily financially, but I think if you're writing poetry, it is at great personal expense. Yeah,
and there's a very vibrant poetry scene around the region, isn't there? I mean, every night of the week you can fetch up in somewhere and still be a poetry reading or people getting together to discuss poetry.
Yes, and I think it's always been like that because, I mean, I did my performance, I did my, if you like, my apprenticeship in folk clubs before open mics were popular. I know that's ages me a little bit, but...
Welcome to the club.
But I used to go into folk clubs, and it was amazing, the response I got from people, because I didn't ask people not to go to the bar, because that could be a dangerous thing to request of people. But nobody went to the bar at all. They were all listening.
Now that's interesting that you mentioned folk clubs, because there's quite a performative aspect to your poetry as well, isn't there?
Yes, I do a lot of performances, and I do you know, the poetry, the humorous evenings, and also I do sort of evenings about love poetry or just general poetry. And also I write ghost stories, and I do performances of my ghost stories as well.
Now, you say performances. Do you read them or do you perform them?
I read them. I'm not a performance poet in that sense.
Yeah.
I'm a poet that performs. So I do read them.
Yeah. So the ghost stories are something extra beyond the poetry.
Yes, yes, they are. I write, you know, I write humorous short stories as well, but I seem to have this leaning towards ghost stories and horror stories.
Why is that?
I have no idea. I think it's just the way I'm made.
Yeah.
That I sort of lean to those ways. But as I say, I do sort of redeem myself by doing, you know, love stories and humorous stories as well.
Yeah.
And also with the collection of poetry, it's humorous, which I thought would show a different side of my character, that I'm not all doom and gloom.
Now, this is the latest one you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes.
Monkey Nuts and Mayhem.
Yes.
How did this come about?
Well, I realised that I had quite a collection of humorous poetry that I'd written over 2 or 3 years. And I thought, well, it's about time I showed this side of myself. Because if I'm doing a general poetry reading, I always start off by doing some humorous material, and I always end by some humorous material, on the premise that if you leave them laughing, it's a good sign, as long as they're not laughing at you and they're laughing at your work. And so with the collection, I thought, well, it's about time I just showed this other side of me. And the title came from a phrase that I just say when I'm angry or frustrated, or monkey nuts and mayhem. So that's where the title came from, and I don't know where that came from.
It's not the worst thing you could say
Oh,
when
it
you...
certainly isn't. It certainly isn't. But
And
I can use it on a book cover as well.
Yeah. Cautionary tales. So they're little kind of snippets that have little kind of messages. Never trust the brochures.
Yes.
I'm with you on that one.
Yes.
Never trust the weather. Catching the rays.
Yes.
Holiday blues. So these are these out of your own experience?
No, they're not, but they're probably from a mix of experiences that other people have told me about, and they've been amalgamated into poems. And I know with Catching the Rays, that just came to me one day in Edinburgh when I saw, it was a beautiful day, and I saw all these people, you know, pasty white, out there sunbathing for the first time. And I thought, oh, there's just going to be some sore people tonight. And that's where it came from.
This couldn't be your gothic side coming through.
Well, possibly, yes.
The side that pulls you towards the ghost stories and so on.
Yes, it could
is
be.
the same one that's saying, you enjoy your sunshine today, but you'll be sorry tomorrow.
You'll pay for it.
So are you working on anything else at the moment?
Yes, I am. I'm actually working towards an exhibition. I work as part of the Poet and the Painter, and we've got a joint exhibition in November in Fir Tree Farm in Crank. So I'm working towards that. I've got a couple of children's books that are first draft finished, and I'm also writing some new ghost stories for Halloween, because Halloween now tends to be my busiest time of year. And then, of course, I'm working towards the humorous collection, perhaps some more poems for the Poetry Society Cafe, because that's going to be a comedy matinee and a comedy evening performance.
Great. So, tell me a bit more about the first one, the Poet and the Painter.
The Poet and the Painter. I work with an artist called Caroline Eves, and Anne does the pictures, and then she leaves them with me. And I write poems to complement the paintings.
Oh, that's interesting. And then how do you find that? Where does your inspiration come from?
It comes from her paintings generally. She's a very evocative painter. And I find that I just look at them, and I have them in my house, about 3 at a time. And they're just there. And I think they just become part of my psyche, if you understand what I mean. I don't sit there and stare at them waiting for the muse to strike.
Yeah.
And then something will come to me. And I've written an awful lot of poetry that I possibly wouldn't have written without the inspiration from the paintings.
Yeah.
And we like to, it sort of pulls together 2 strands of art. We did a lot of work a few years ago, but then I changed jobs and, life gets in the way. But we've now decided to reinvent it and it's our 20th anniversary this year, so we're doing a special exhibition.
Great. It's interesting you say also that you're trying to amalgamate two different forms. I mean,
Yes.
sometimes that's when the most interesting stuff kind of happens, isn't it? When you mix up genres. I mean, you mentioned the folk music
Yes.
earlier on, and when poetry mixes with art, mixes with music, mixes with all sorts of things.
Yes, I think that's very true. I did a show called The Journey Continues, and it was all my poems linked together to tell the story of 8 youngsters, 8 teenagers who had left school and what happened to them, and then a reunion 20 years later. And the whole narrative was in the poems. And the students from St Helens College, the drama students, they acted it. I taught them some dance moves, so there was dancing in it. We had music in it to cue the poems in, and we had an audiovisual background, so we had an audiovisual yearbook. So one of them, like Jake, would be most likely to become a rock star. And then you moved on 20 years and you saw what happened to them. So that brought in so many different kinds. You know, it brought in multimedia, it brought in dancing, music, acting, and poetry and performance.
That sounds really interesting.
Yes.
Well, it's been really nice talking to you,
Thank you.
Sue. Thanks very much for coming in. And please stay with us for part 2 when we preview the Writing on the Wall American Dreams Festival. Writing on the Wall is a Liverpool-based community organisation coordinating projects and events that celebrate writing in all its forms. Its aim is to embrace literature, creative writing, journalism and non-fiction, poetry, songwriting and storytelling. On May the 1st, they launched their American Dreams Festival, a star-spangled events programme of spoken word, theatre, film, discussion and debate. We met up with Mike Morris, founder member and co-director Madeleine Hennigan to learn more.
Writing on the Wall is a month-long festival of events, literary events, debates, discussions, film, theatre, in conversations. We bring major names from around the world to Liverpool, and we also involve a lot of people from local communities in writing projects and launching their own writing. We began in the year 2000, so this year will be our 16th festival. We began as a small 5-day festival, really trying to link communities together with great writers from around the world and engage people in new writing. Since then, we've developed into a month-long festival, and we do the same thing but on a much bigger scale, and we run projects right throughout the year. We're different than a lot of other literary festivals because our aim really is to promote new writing, to engage people in creative activity and to give people a voice. In the festival, we have film, theatre, book launches, discussions, debates and panels, and things that can really kind of get people excited, get people talking, get people engaged. We do dance, you know, this year we've got an event where we're going to be having dance lessons before the event. So really quite exciting things, slightly different, and particularly with the aim of encouraging people to come along, get involved in cultural activity, get involved in writing, get involved in discussion and debate. We have workshops. We've been running projects throughout the year called What's Your Story? And they are creative writing projects that aim to get people engaging with other people and finding a way to express themselves. And for all of these projects, we publish a book of the work of the writers. In the past year, we probably published 50 writers in new chapters of the work, in poems and short stories. And in the festival, we have showcases where they can come along and share their work with their family, their friends and the public. Our ethos covers quite a lot of ground, really. I suppose to sum it up, it's about engaging diverse communities, and that goes from the black community in the city to women, to young people, and to bring them together, but also to give them a way to work together within their communities, to express themselves, to write, to discuss ideas, and to bring them out to the public. And it's about really human voices, you know, so that people can see the people within the communities. And then different communities are encouraged to come together and come forward. We've run a number of projects, and one that we're launching this year is called From the Great War to Race Riots. And we were given an archive of material from black seamen and sailors and workers who were left destitute in Liverpool after the First World War. And so we're using that as a project for people to partly trace the family histories, to look at the stories of these people who were stranded, and explore the social and political and cultural context of that time, which was around about 1920 to 22. So sometimes we use historic projects to explore contemporary events and ideas as well. So we're quite creative in our approach as to what creative writing is. A lot of groups will just, which is very good, but will sit and have groups that, just do a general creative writing. We do that as well. But sometimes we'll pick up on themes and we will use them to work with communities to explore their own history as well. One of the founding principles of Writing on the Wall is a belief that engagement in creative activity, particularly creative writing, can have a transformative effect upon people and communities. It adds to their well-being, it helps them to engage with people, and it finds ways for them to express themselves. We've seen a direct impact of that with people coming back to us from the groups that we work with, telling us how it's transformed their lives. We had a woman who worked on a creative writing project we did with Mental Health Consortium, who said to us that before the writing project, she was in effect a hermit. She hardly came out of the house. And this is really engaged, firstly by weekly workshops and then by going out and speaking to new audiences. So that's the type of impact that we aim to have, that we believe creative writing can have, and feedback indicates that that is working.
The festival is themed American Dreams, and that is because it's the 175th anniversary of the establishment of the Cunard shipping line, and the City of Liverpool and many of the arts and cultural organisations are going to be part of a huge celebration. So on the bank holiday weekend, the last bank holiday weekend in May, there will be 3 Cunard ships, the 3 Queens, coming into the port of Liverpool. And then on the 4th of July, the Queen Mary will also be in dock. And between those dates, there's going to be a huge cultural programme celebrating everything Cunard, everything American. And the Writing on the Wall Festival, which begins on the 1st of May, is really a precursor to that. So we've themed our festival American Dreams, and we've brought over some fantastic people from the States to explore the cultural links that exist. So this year's festival theme is American Dreams, to reflect the celebrations, the Cunard celebrations, but as is the wild tradition, to explore perhaps darker realities of that so-called dream and different aspects of American life and American culture. So our festival launches on the 1st, and we are bringing over a very talented young hip-hop violinist who's also a spoken word artist. His name is Shayshawn McPherson. He's going to be performing on the 1st, but at events throughout the festival. So he'll be performing on Light Night on the roof of the library with our young people. We've also got a very exciting day called Strictly Harlem, which will take place on the 9th of May, and that's an all-day and night event at the Blackie. We'll have dance classes, Lindy Hop classes actually. We'll be exploring the work of a great crime writer, Chester Himes, and then we've got an extravaganza of a show really with Lem Sisse, Selena Godden, some local artists, Teo Aluku, and a poet called Malik. So that's going to be a fantastic night. We're also bringing a writer over called Ryan Gattis, who has written a book on the LA riots, and he's going to be appearing in Waterstones. And then our festival will then merge into the celebrations for the One Magnificent City. We have a play on for 2 weeks called The Morrie, which has been written by my co-director, Mike Morris. He's adapted the play from a short story by a Liverpool seafarer called George Gerrard, and that's going to be taking place in the basement of the Cunard building. And then on the 2nd of July, we will be joined by America's most celebrated crime writer, Walter Mosley, who's flying over literally to be with us for One Magnificent City and the WOW Festival.
We use a theme every year, and this year it's American Dreams, to kind of encapsulate what's happening with the festival and linking it to other events. But every festival we have a series of very eclectic events that take place right throughout the month. And this year we have the former lead singer with Everything But the Girl, Tracy Thorn. She's going to be doing an In Conversation on her new book, Naked, at the Albert Hall. We have an event that's very contemporary, very current, which is called Pitch Black, the story of black British footballers, which is the launch of a new book, which is interviews with black British footballers right throughout the years. And that's going to have footballers there who are going to talk about their experiences as well. We then have an event called Thick as Thieves, Governed by Deceit, which is looking at the government and the establishment. And that's a writer called Owen Jones, who's a very popular commentator. He's written a book about the establishment and how they've been getting away with it. So that should be good fun. Quite a good debate around that. There's lots of issues, I think, people, and particularly with the general election happening, that comes after the general election. So it should be very interesting, reflecting upon what happens then. And then we also have our Pulp Idol competition, where we're going to be hopefully launching brand new authors and putting them on the path to publication. The festival begins on Friday the 1st of May, and it runs right through to the 28th of May for the May events. We then have a series of events taking place in June. We have a play on called The Murray, based upon the writing of a writer from the 1920s called George Gerrard. We have our flash fiction competition, which this year is called The Killing Pool and is about crime. And then we have the writer Walter Mosley that Madeline mentioned earlier.
If you have any comments or suggestions for the show, please contact us at artsalivebooks@baytvliverpool.com. We look forward to hearing from you. See you on the next edition of Arts Alive Books. Good night.